One of the most powerful opportunities in the United States. And when I say opportunity, it doesn't seem like an opportunity until you absolutely need it. And that is that according to our Constitution and our Bill of Rights, we are innocent until proven guilty. Meaning all of the things that you might have done can't be held against you until it's proven that you've done something wrong. What you've thought, what you've considered, what you've pondered, maybe even what you've verbalized as an idea that's gone through your head, but you haven't really processed it or even actually done anything about it. All of those are, well, maybe they're not good ideas. Maybe they're dangerous ideas. Maybe they're downright criminal ideas. But the idea itself isn't the crime. It's acting on that idea. Now, as leaders, one of our roles, and I know not everybody sees this, but one of our roles as leaders is justice. Meaning we've got to stand up for what's right and stand up to make sure that what's wrong is acknowledged. And that's a hard role in today's society. Today I want to talk a little bit about a interrogation technique known as the read technique. If you've never done any research on this, I recommend that you do. But I want to talk about that today as a leadership aspect. Welcome to Leading Leaders Podcast. 5-minute videos, 5 days a week. The read technique is a technique created for law enforcement. Now, it's used by everybody from IRS auditors to, the supervisors in certain fields of profession where they might need to interrogate or at least investigate behavior of people within their team. It's also used by law enforcement from the time they pull you over on the side of the road for speeding or failure to use your turn signal, or I thought it looked like your inspection sticker or your registration sticker was out of date. Any one of those things. And now they can begin to apply this technique and follow it down a path that leads to your admission of guilt or your confession, depending on the seriousness of the infraction. Now, the scary part to me about this technique is that this technique is designed to cause the person who's being interviewed and then transitioning from interview into interrogation. It's designed to cause them to say things that implicate themselves into a crime. Now, the Fifth Amendment of the United States is specifically designed to say, I have the right to remain silent. I have the right to say absolutely nothing that would unintentionally incriminate me. And yet, in the read technique, there's actually a designed process of rapport building that allows the investigator to cause the person to waive that right unintentionally. They might say subtle little things like, well, it seems like we're having a good solid conversation here. I just want to tie up some loose ends, maybe, finish out my report and then we'll be all done here and perhaps you'll be free to go. Okay. If that sentence comes up in your conversation, they're about to move into some more determinate investigative procedures to lay guilt at your feet. The challenge is, because they haven't heard the words "you're under arrest" or "you've been suspected of this crime" or "we believe you to be guilty of this crime," most people just go on with the interview. They go on with the question answering. They fill in the blanks. They fill in some blanks that maybe, I don't know, they weren't even there. But they can fill in some blanks from basic knowledge. And see, the challenge is that allows the investigator, the interviewer, to continue the process when you have a right to say nothing. Now, where am I getting at with this as a leader? See, the challenge that we see in a lot of today's society is that there's a lot of guilt or innocence placed on your ideas alone. There's a presumption that if you thought this, then you'll also do this. And that's not always true. Some people think through things legitimately. And by that I mean they process the consequences. They process the concepts. They process the ideas. They think, well, my knee-jerk reaction is to punch you in your nose, but I wouldn't really do that because, I don't know, I've never really punched anybody in the nose. And that's not my style. And I may get loud, but no, I would never do that. Does it mean I didn't think about it? No, it doesn't mean I didn't think about it. It means I didn't do it. I have enough sense not to act on it. See, the challenge with this read technique is that it presumes that you're guilty. In fact, one of the steps in the technique is to refuse to listen to the denial of the accused. Let that sink in for a minute. One of the steps in the Reed technique is to refuse to listen to the denials of the accused. So you may actually be guilty. You may actually have done something wrong, but you protect yourself in your silence. You may also be perfectly innocent. In fact, one of the studies that I watched in doing this research of my own, there was a man at his own birthday party who was eventually convicted of a crime and spent 17 years in prison for a crime that later there was significant evidence that he didn't commit, but he had a confession. And that confession meant he spent 17 years of a 20-year sentence in prison for a crime that all the evidence proves he didn't commit, but he confessed to. Why did he confess? Because the interrogation technique is so solid in its psychology, in its use and manipulation of the way that the average human thinks. And that process alone is being used by our media. Let that one settle in for a minute. The idea that there are certain people who they're guilty because we say they're guilty. They're guilty because we don't like their ideas. They're guilty because they associate with so-and-so, or they've been in such and such a place, or they've done such and such a thing in their past. That makes them guilty. Therefore, when we interview them, their interview will basically be an interrogation. And we're coming at this with the presumption that they're guilty because we don't like something they said or did in the past, and B, we will not give them the opportunity to deny. Their denial will never be heard, and if it is, it will not be justified. It will be mocked, it will be laughed at, it will be talked over. My friends, that by itself is a miscarriage of justice. But if you think I'm kidding, just go back and look at some of the recent media interrogations, interviews, all across the board, various levels of celebrities, local personalities, major personalities globally, and you will find that from social media to major media, interview processes have become more interrogatory, more interrogation than they have just been interview. And if you think, like the old adage says, I got nothing to hide, so why would I lie? You may not think you have anything to hide because you believe that what you've done is right. But like I mentioned in a podcast a few weeks ago, things that you believe are right are judged by others to be wrong. And since we've lost a baseline of absolutes, all they've got to do is catch you agreeing with yourself that what you did was right, while it's a disagreement that they believe is wrong. And suddenly you'll find yourself on the wrong side of the interrogation, the wrong side of the interview. As leaders, part of our role is to make sure that we are definitive about what we know to be right and wrong, what we know to be just and unjust. As leaders, it is our role to hold that baseline. Somebody has to. And if the law enforcement can use what they call the false evidence ploy, if the interrogator, if the investigator, if the interviewer can throw out evidence that they know not to be true, in the process of causing you to confess to something that you're not guilty of, then how much more someone who has no legal ramifications for lying? How much more can they throw something out there, whether it's the media, a job interview, a potential hire? How much more can they throw out what they know to be false evidence just to get you to confess to or to say something that will later incriminate you for their own advantage? Oh yeah, we see it all the time. We see it in the media. We see it in what we consider to be just a standard interview, but becomes an interrogation. And they use the false evidence ploy in order to get you to say or to do something that incriminates you later. I challenge you as leaders, when you're using interview skills and interview techniques, when you're reading people's body language, when you're asking the questions that lead them to answer, and we've all taken the psychological profile test for job applications where they ask the same question 5 or 6 times, and the reason they're asking it different ways or under different scenarios is to see how honest you are. if you're the leader employing those kind of techniques, please be sure that you have the integrity to know what a baseline truth is, to know what the baseline of justice versus injustice is. And as a leader, if you're employing these techniques, do that with integrity of your own. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day. Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.